Have you ever met someone who barely speaks, yet somehow their silence fills the room? There's something magnetic about them. The way they stand back while everyone else rushes to speak. It's not that they don't have thoughts, it's that their thoughts are too rich to be wasted on noise. When they do talk, the air changes. People lean in. Every word feels like it carries history, reason, and weight. You can almost sense that their silence isn't emptiness. It's observation, it's awareness, it's the mind quietly gathering details the rest of us miss. They're not cold, they're not shy, they're not lost in the background. They're just tuned to a different frequency, one that values meaning over volume. The world today rewards those who speak the fastest, not those who think the deepest. But these quiet people, they live in a different rhythm. They pause before they speak because they want their words to matter. They're not trying to impress, they're trying to express with purpose. Their quietness isn't a sign of insecurity, it's evidence of mastery. They don't need to prove who they are by speaking, they let their stillness do the talking. Psychologists say that silence isn't a void, it's data. When a quiet person listens, they're not just hearing sounds, they're decoding tone, micro-expressions, and hidden meanings that most people overlook. They can sense hesitation in your breath, tension in your shoulders, or emotion hiding behind your smile. While everyone else is waiting for their turn to speak, they're gathering the truth behind the words. That's why being around them can feel both comforting and intimidating, because they see you sometimes more clearly than you see yourself. Quiet people don't talk much because they think too much. Their minds are like mirrors, reflecting, replaying, analyzing. Every conversation becomes a landscape of possibilities. They think about what they'll say, how it might sound, how it might land, and whether it's even worth saying. It's not indecision, it's emotional precision. Their silence is not hesitation, it's respect for truth. They believe every word has a cost, and they refuse to spend it carelessly. In a noisy world, that restraint feels radical, because while everyone else is desperate to be seen and heard, the quiet person is content to understand. They've learned that noise doesn't equal intelligence, and that talking more doesn't make an idea more real. Their silence has depth, and that depth has gravity. When they finally speak, people listen. Not because they demand attention, but because their silence has already earned it. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's a shield, a soft armor built after years of learning that not every truth is safe to share. A quiet person may look calm on the outside, but inside their thoughts are moving like storms. They carry entire conversations in their heads before speaking even one word aloud. Their mind replays past moments, analyzes future outcomes, and searches endlessly for the right expression. That pause you see before they speak, it's not hesitation, it's harmony. They're trying to make sure what leaves their mouth aligns with what lives in their heart. To the world, that pause may look like stillness, but inside, it's an entire orchestra of thought tuning itself before a single note is played. For many quiet people, silence began as survival. Somewhere in their past, there were moments when their words were ignored, dismissed, or even punished. Maybe they grew up in spaces where being loud meant being wrong, where the room was already too full of shouting for anyone to listen. So they learned to retreat inward, to find safety in their own thoughts. Over time, this became more than just a habit. It became a home. Their quiet wasn't chosen. It was crafted, refined by experience, and in that home, they discovered something unexpected: peace. Not the absence of chaos, but the mastery of it. Psychologists call this adaptive silence. A way the nervous system protects itself from emotional overload. When life teaches you that words can be weapons, silence becomes your shield. But here's what's remarkable. That shield doesn't harden them. It deepens them. It teaches them to feel without exploding, to observe without judgment, to understand before reacting. They don't speak to control. They speak to connect. They don't silence others. They silence noise. Their restraint isn't fear. It's power disguised as peace. Yet even peace has its price. The quiet ones often carry invisible weight. They feel deeply, but show little. care intensely but reveal slowly. Their empathy makes them absorb everything: the tension in a room, the sadness in a friend's tone, the unspoken grief behind someone's smile. To others, they might seem distant, but in truth, they're too close. They feel every emotional vibration around them, and it stays. That's why solitude isn't loneliness for them. It's recovery. Silence isn't empty space. It's their way of recharging after feeling too much of the world at once, and that's what most people never see: the emotional exhaustion that comes from caring silently. While others vent, shout, or debate, the quiet ones process everything inwardly. They don't release their emotions into the air. They store them like echoes in their chest. But instead of drowning in it, they learn to use it, to understand humanity better, to empathize deeper, to love more honestly. That's why, when a quiet person finally speaks from the heart, it feels different. Their words don't just describe emotion, they carry it. Every sentence feels lived, not rehearsed. And yet, the quiet ones are often the most empathetic souls you'll ever meet. They have this rare ability to feel the world in ways that can't be taught. It's almost like emotional X-ray vision. They notice when your smile doesn't reach your eyes, when your laugh comes a second too late, when your voice trembles, even though your words say, "I'm fine." They absorb the feelings that others hide between sentences. They don't interrupt to fix you, they simply understand. Because they've lived in silence long enough to know what it feels like when no one listens. And so, their compassion doesn't come from pity. It comes from recognition. They don't look at your pain as a problem. They look at it as a language they already speak fluently. Their empathy is quiet, but it's powerful. They won't flood you with advice or quotes. They'll give you presence, the kind of presence that doesn't rush you, doesn't judge you, doesn't demand that you make sense of your feelings right away. They'll sit beside you in your storm and hold the silence steady until you can breathe again. Because that's what they've always done for themselves, held the silence until the chaos softened. Their gift is subtle but sacred. They make you feel seen without making you perform to be seen. But that depth, that endless capacity to feel, comes with a cost. When you experience the world this deeply, you don't just see its beauty, you feel its pain. Quiet people often carry invisible scars. They might walk through the world appearing calm, but inside, their hearts are landscapes filled with unspoken stories. They've witnessed too much, felt too much, and kept too much inside. And while that makes them wise beyond measure, it can also make them weary. Sometimes they withdraw, not because they're cold, but because they need to protect what's left of their peace. Their silence isn't rejection, it's repair. Still, there's a strange magic in that kind of stillness, because when you stop trying to talk over the world, you start to hear it, really hear it. You hear the rhythm of emotion beneath people's words. You notice the pauses that reveal more truth than sentences ever could. Quiet people understand this naturally. They live in the spaces between words, the moments between heartbeats, the gentle transitions where real human connection hides. That's why their relationships, when they choose them, are profound. They don't connect for entertainment, they connect for meaning. They don't collect people. They understand them, and this understanding becomes their unspoken power because in a world addicted to attention, they're addicted to authenticity. While others chase the spotlight, they find light in stillness. They don't crave validation. They crave truth. They don't want to be the loudest in the room. They want to be the realest, and that's what makes their presence unforgettable. You may forget what they said, but you'll never forget how they made you feel because when quiet people love, they do it completely. When they listen, they do it fully. And when they speak, it's not just communication, it's revelation. But silence, no matter how beautiful, carries its own weight. For some quiet souls, that silence becomes both their protection and their prison. They long to be understood, to speak freely, to be heard. But years of being overlooked or misunderstood have taught them that words can sometimes build walls instead of bridges. So They learn to keep their truth inside, turning every emotion into thought and every thought into reflection. It's not repression. It's a kind of discipline. They tell themselves, I'll say it when I'm ready. But readiness often never comes because by the time the words form, the moment has already passed. And so they keep it. Every unspoken sentence, every almost confession, every piece of their soul, hidden behind calm eyes and gentle nods. This is the paradox of the quiet mind. It feels too deeply to speak lightly. Their silence is not an absence of words. It's an overflow of meaning that refuses to be reduced. Inside them, emotions rise and fall like tides, so invisible to the world, yet powerful enough to move it. They feel joy so intensely it scares them. They feel pain so completely it reshapes them. And in that intensity, they learn to retreat, to give themselves space to process what others would rather escape. It's not that they avoid life. They just live it slower, deeper, and with a kind of reverence most people have forgotten. But when you hold that much inside, something happens. You begin to mistake stillness for control. You convince yourself that silence means safety. You start believing that speaking will unravel you. That if you let one truth escape, the rest will follow like a flood. So you hold back. You smile when you want to scream. You nod when you want to challenge. You say it's okay when it isn't. And the world praises you for being calm, balanced, mature, not realizing that calm isn't always peace. Sometimes it's pressure disguised as grace. Psychologists have a word for this tension: emotional containment. It's what happens when you feel so much that you stop showing any of it. Quiet people often become masters of this art, keeping storms behind their smiles. They learn to regulate emotions not by releasing them, but by reshaping them into understanding. They turn pain into empathy. They turn disappointment into insight. They turn heartbreak into observation. And though this gives them wisdom, it can also make them lonely. Because how do you share a mind that's always thinking, or a heart that feels everything but rarely speaks? That's why quiet people often exist in a world of contradiction. They crave connection but fear chaos. They want to be seen but not spotlighted. They dream of being understood but dread being misunderstood. So they stay in the middle, half open, half hidden, hoping someone will notice the language they speak without words. And when someone finally does, when someone listens instead of interrogates, it's like oxygen after years underwater. They bloom quietly like dawn after a long night, not with noise but with light. When you strip away all the noise of the world, the endless talking, the constant proving, the competition to be heard, you realize something simple yet profound. Silence was never the absence of sound. It was the presence of understanding. Quiet people know this truth instinctively. They've discovered that real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. There's a kind of confidence in not needing to win every argument, not needing to fill every gap in conversation, not needing to broadcast every emotion. They understand that the loudest person in the room isn't always the most certain. Sometimes, it's the one who's still trying to convince themselves. Silence for the quiet soul isn't about retreat, it's about alignment. It's the space where thoughts settle, emotions breathe, and meaning sharpens. It's where self-awareness is born, where wisdom takes shape. When they fall silent, they're not absent. They're present in a way that most people never reach. They're listening not just to others, but to themselves. They've made peace with stillness. And that peace has turned into power, because in a world obsessed with speed, silence slows everything down just enough for truth to catch up. It's in those unspoken moments, the pause before an answer, the look before a smile, the breath before a word, that life reveals itself. Quiet people live in those moments. They read what others rush past. They see what others skip over. They hear what others drown out. And maybe that's why they change the world in ways that words never could. History remembers the thinkers, the inventors, the artists, the ones who spent more time listening to their thoughts than selling them. They were the ones who saw connections no one else did because they allowed silence to become their teacher. There's a calmness that surrounds quiet people. Not because they've escaped life's storms, but because they've learned how to stand inside them without losing their center. They don't react to every wave. They watch the pattern of the tide. They don't chase every thought. They wait for the truth that stays when the noise fades. That's not detachment. That's wisdom. And here's the thing most people don't realize. The quiet ones aren't trying to be mysterious. They're just protecting something sacred. Their energy, their clarity, their peace. They've seen what happens when people speak without thinking, when emotions explode without understanding, when the world gets louder but not wiser. So they choose differently. They choose silence, not as surrender but as strength. So the next time you meet someone who doesn't talk much, don't assume their silence means nothing. Maybe they're simply measuring the moment. Maybe they're giving you space to reveal who you are. Or maybe they already understand you deeper than your words ever could. And if you're one of them, one of the quiet ones, remember this. You don't have to be louder to matter. Your silence already speaks. It speaks through your calm when others panic. It speaks through your eyes when words fall short. It speaks through the way you understand people without them having to explain themselves. You are not missing out by being quiet. You're simply operating at a frequency the world has forgotten how to hear, because meaning doesn't live in noise. It lives in presence. It lives in patience. It lives in the stillness between words. In the end, the world won't remember who spoke the most. It will remember who made it feel the most. And the quiet ones, they do that effortlessly. They don't raise their voices. They raise the room's awareness. They don't dominate the space. They transform it. Their silence doesn't distance them. It defines them. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of everything that matters. And since awareness, empathy, truth, and peace. It's not what hides behind the noise. It's what gives the noise meaning. And that's the true psychology of people who don't talk too much. They don't seek to be heard. They seek to understand. And in that understanding, they find everything the rest of the world is still shouting for.